Throughout human history, the relationship between ends and means has stood at the heart of philosophical thought, moral reflection, and political action. Again and again, individuals and societies have been forced to confront a difficult question. Is it acceptable to use questionable methods in pursuit of a greater goal? Few ideas capture this tension more clearly than the phrase often associated with Niccolò Machiavelli, "The ends justify the means." Whether fully accurate to his wording or not, this expression reflects a powerful and unsettling way of thinking, one that continues to echo through modern life. To understand this idea, it is essential to step back into Machiavelli's world. He lived during a time when Italy was not a unified country, but a patchwork of rival city-states constantly competing for power. Florence, Venice, Milan, and others were locked in cycles of alliance, betrayal, and war. Stability was fragile, and survival often depended not on moral purity, but on strategic calculation. In such a reality, leaders could not afford to rely solely on ideals. They needed to act decisively, sometimes ruthlessly, in order to protect their states. Machiavelli observed this world closely. Rather than imagining how politics should function in a perfect society, he chose to describe it as it truly was. People, he believed, are not naturally virtuous. They are driven by fear, ambition, desire, and self-interest. They can be loyal one moment and disloyal the next. Because of this, a ruler who depends only on honesty and kindness may quickly find themselves outmaneuvered by those willing to act without such constraints. From this perspective, the idea that the ends justify the means begins to take shape. It is not simply a celebration of cruelty or deception. Instead, it is a recognition that, in certain circumstances, strict adherence to moral rules may lead to failure, chaos, or even destruction. For Machiavelli, the ultimate goal of a ruler is not personal glory, but the preservation of order and stability. If harsh actions are required to prevent greater disorder, he suggests they may be justified. This introduces a difficult moral tension. On one hand, we are taught that honesty, compassion, and fairness are essential virtues. On the other hand, real-world situations often present conflicts where these values seem to clash with practical necessity. Machiavelli does not deny the importance of virtue, but he argues that a ruler must be flexible. It is not always enough to be good. Sometimes one must appear good while acting strategically behind the scenes. This distinction between appearance and reality is one of his most provocative ideas. A successful leader, he suggests, understands the importance of perception. People judge based on what they see, not always on what is true. Therefore, maintaining an image of virtue can be just as important as actually possessing it. This does not mean that morality is meaningless, but rather that it operates differently in the political sphere. Of course, such ideas have sparked intense criticism. Many argue that once we accept the notion that the ends justify the means, we open the door to abuse. Who decides which ends are worthy enough? What prevents a leader from justifying any action, no matter how harmful, by claiming it serves a greater good? History provides many examples of individuals who have used this logic to excuse injustice, oppression, and violence. There is also the question of long-term consequences. Actions taken in the name of necessity may achieve immediate results, but they can also create lasting damage. A ruler who relies too heavily on fear and manipulation may secure power in the short term, but at the cost of trust and legitimacy. Over time, this erosion of trust can weaken the very stability they sought to protect. And yet, despite these criticisms, Machiavelli's perspective remains deeply relevant. In modern politics, leaders still face situations where every option carries moral costs. Decisions about war, security, and governance often involve choosing between imperfect alternatives.
Even in business and everyday life, people encounter moments where the right path is not clear and where achieving a goal may require difficult compromises. Consider how often individuals are faced with smaller versions of this dilemma. A person might exaggerate the truth in a job interview to increase their chances of success. A competitor might use aggressive tactics to outperform rivals. A student might cut corners under pressure to achieve better results. In each case, the same underlying question appears: is the outcome worth the method? What makes this issue so enduring is that there is no simple answer. Absolute moral rules can feel reassuring, but reality is often more complicated. At the same time, abandoning ethical principles entirely can lead to a world where trust and fairness disappear. The challenge, then, is not to choose one extreme or the other, but to navigate the space in between.
This is where balance becomes essential. Recognizing the importance of outcomes does not mean ignoring the value of integrity. Similarly, holding on to moral principles does not mean refusing to adapt to reality. The key lies in judgment, the ability to weigh consequences, consider alternatives, and take responsibility for the choices we make. Machiavelli's lasting contribution may not be a single doctrine, but a way of thinking. He forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature and power. He reminds us that good intentions alone are not always enough, and that the world can be shaped as much by strategy as by virtue. At the same time, his ideas challenge us to reflect on our limits, on how far we are willing to go, and what lines we refuse to cross. As time has passed, societies have attempted to place boundaries on the use of power through laws, institutions, and shared ethical standards. Concepts like human rights and accountability seek to ensure that the pursuit of goals does not come at an unacceptable cost. These developments can be seen as a response to the very dangers that Machiavelli's ideas highlight. Still, the tension remains. Every generation faces its own version of the same question. In moments of crisis, when the stakes are high and the pressure is intense, the temptation to prioritize results over principles becomes stronger. It is in these moments that the debate becomes most meaningful. At this point, it is worth slowing down and considering something deeper. Why are we so drawn to the idea that the ends might justify the means? Part of the answer lies in human ambition. People want to succeed. They want security, recognition, and control over their circumstances. When these desires are strong enough, they can push individuals to rationalize actions they would otherwise reject. The mind becomes skilled at creating justifications, especially when the outcome seems desirable. Another reason is fear. Fear of failure, fear of loss, fear of being left behind. Under pressure, moral clarity can begin to blur. What once seemed unacceptable may start to appear necessary. In this sense, the debate is not just philosophical, it is deeply psychological. It reveals how people think and behave under stress, uncertainty, and competition. We can also see this dynamic in larger systems. Governments, corporations, and institutions often justify controversial decisions by appealing to necessity. Surveillance may be defended in the name of security. Harsh economic measures may be justified as unavoidable. In each case, the same pattern appears. A goal is presented as essential, and the methods are framed as the only way to achieve it. But this raises another important question. Are these methods truly necessary or simply convenient? Often, the idea that there is no other choice can be misleading. Alternatives may exist, but they require more effort, more creativity, or more patience. Choosing the easier path can be tempting, especially when the consequences are not immediately visible. This is why critical thinking becomes so important. Accepting the idea that the ends justify the means without question can be dangerous.
It is necessary to examine each situation carefully, to ask who benefits, who is harmed, and whether the same goal could be achieved in a less harmful way. Responsibility does not end with the outcome, it extends to the process as well. There is also a personal dimension to this discussion that cannot be ignored. Over time, the choices we make shape who we become. If someone repeatedly justifies harmful actions for the sake of success, it can gradually change their sense of right and wrong. What begins as an exception can turn into a habit. In this way, the means do not only affect the world around us, they shape our character from within. At the same time, it would be unrealistic to expect perfect moral consistency in every situation. Life is complex and people are not flawless. Mistakes happen. Compromises are sometimes unavoidable. The goal, then, is not perfection, but awareness. Being conscious of the choices we make and willing to reflect on them is what allows growth and responsibility.
In the end, the idea that the ends justify the means is not a rule to follow blindly, but a question to consider carefully. It invites us to think critically about our actions, our motivations, and their consequences. It asks us to look beyond simple answers and to engage with the complexity of real life. Perhaps the most important lesson is this: neither ends nor means can be ignored. A noble goal does not automatically make every action acceptable, just as pure intentions do not guarantee good outcomes. What matters is the relationship between them, the balance we strike, the choices we make, and the responsibility we accept. And so, the discussion continues, not just in the realm of politics or philosophy, but in everyday decisions, both large and small. Each choice we make reflects, in some way, our own answer to this timeless question.